There is a bridge, long and ancient. It stretches across a chasm so deep that no bottom can be seen. On one side lies the world of the living, where cities hum with voices and temples echo with prayers. On the other side lies something else, a place that was meant to remain forgotten, a land sealed away by those who feared what dwelled within. This is where our story begins, not with a hero's triumphant march, but with a young man's desperate ride into exile. His name is Wander. On his horse, a mare named Agro, he carries a burden wrapped in cloth. A girl. Her name is Mono. She is dead, and he is about to break the oldest law of all. The Forbidden Lands wait in silence. They always have. They always will. The bridge is not simply a structure of stone and time. It is a threshold, a liminal space that separates what is permitted from what is forbidden. As Wander crosses it, the architecture itself seems to warn him. The stone is weathered beyond measure, worn smooth by winds that carry no scent of life. No birds circle overhead, no insects hum in the grass. The only sound is the steady rhythm of Agro's hooves against ancient rock. This is a world that has been emptied, not destroyed, but drained, as if something vast and terrible once breathed here, and when it exhaled for the last time, it took all warmth and motion with it. The sky hangs heavy with diffused light, neither day nor night, but something suspended between. A perpetual twilight that suggests time itself moves differently in this place. The geography of the Forbidden Lands operates as more than mere backdrop. Every valley, every cliff, every ruin speaks to a civilization that once thrived here. Stone bridges arc across canyons with a grace that modern hands could never replicate. Temples rise from cliffsides, their foundations melded seamlessly with the living rock. Platforms and terraces suggest gardens that once bloomed. Aqueducts that once carried water now carry only wind and shadow. What happened here? The game never tells us directly, but the landscape remembers. The ruins are not scattered randomly. They form patterns, concentric circles radiating outward from a central point, the shrine of worship, as if the entire civilization was oriented toward a single purpose, a single act of devotion, or perhaps containment, because this was not always a forbidden land. Once, people lived here. They built. They worshipped. They sang songs and carved their stories into stone, but something went wrong. Something so catastrophic that the survivors sealed the entire region away from the world. They destroyed the bridge behind them, or perhaps they thought they had. What Wander crosses is either a reconstruction or a fragment that refused to fall. The silence in the Forbidden Lands is absolute in a way that defies nature. In any wilderness there should be ambient sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of predators, the buzz of life in 1,000 small forms. But here there is nothing. Even the wind seems hesitant. It moves through the grass without causing it to whisper. It touches the water without raising ripples. The world holds its breath. This emptiness serves a purpose in the narrative architecture of the game. It creates space, not just physical space, but psychological space. Room for the player to think, to feel the weight of what they are about to do. The journey to each Colossus is never short. Minutes pass with only the sound of hoofbeats. The landscape unfolds slowly, deliberately, giving time for doubt to creep in, for questions to form. And there are questions. So many questions that the game refuses to answer. Who built these structures? What god did they worship? What catastrophe unmade them? The ruins suggest a culture of immense sophistication. The engineering alone speaks to knowledge that might rival or exceed anything in the world Wander left behind. Yet it all lies abandoned, reclaimed by moss and time. Some ruins show signs of violence, scorch marks on stone, walls that have been shattered from within rather than eroded from without. Other structures stand pristine, as if their inhabitants simply walked away one morning and never returned. The juxtaposition is unsettling. It suggests that whatever ended this civilization was selective, purposeful, not a natural disaster but an act of will. The temples deserve particular attention. They are everywhere, not the grand central shrine but smaller sanctuaries scattered throughout the land, each one positioned with geometric precision, each one facing the same direction, toward the centre, toward the place where Dormin was sealed. This could imply that the ancient people were not simply guarding against Dormin's escape, but actively maintaining the seal. A network of prayer and ritual stretched across the entire region, each temple a node in a vast containment array. But now the temples stand empty. The prayers have long since faded, the rituals have been forgotten, only the architecture remains, and the colossi, 16 massive beings that roam the land in patterns that seem almost ritualistic. They do not hunt, they do not build, they simply exist, walking their circuits, sleeping in their appointed places, waiting. For what? The game suggests they are the locks that keep Dormin imprisoned, but there is another interpretation. Perhaps they are not locks but guardians, not chains but wardens who volunteered for this duty, each one a fragment of the civilization that once thrived here, transformed into living monuments to ensure that what was sealed would remain sealed. The Forbidden Lands are not evil, they are wounded. There is a melancholy to every vista, a sense of profound loss. This was a place of beauty once. Gardens grew in the valleys, music echoed from the courtyards, children played in the plazas. Now there is only grass reclaiming, stone, water-eroding foundation, the patient work of time undoing what hands built with hope. And yet, beneath it all, something waits, something vast and patient and utterly alien to the concepts of right and wrong that govern the living world. It sleeps in the foundations, it whispers through the ruins, it pulses in the sword Wanda carries, the blade that belonged to someone who came here before, someone who failed, or perhaps someone who succeeded in sealing Dormin away at the cost of everything they held dear. The Forbidden Lands are liminal in every sense. They exist between life and death, between the sacred and the profane, between what was and what might be. To enter them is to step outside the normal flow of time and consequence. It is to enter a space where ancient laws still apply, where forbidden knowledge waits in the silence, where a young man desperate enough to defy gods might find what he seeks. But the price is always written in the landscape, in the empty temples, in the abandoned homes, in the bridges that lead only to ruins. The Forbidden Lands are a warning written in stone and silence. They say, some doors are closed for a reason. Some knowledge should remain buried. Some dead should stay dead. Wanda does not heed the warning. He has come too far, loved too deeply. His grief has carved a hollow in his chest that can only be filled by the impossible, and so he rides toward the centre, toward the shrine of worship, toward the voice that promises everything he desires, toward Dormin. The voice that greets Wanda in the shrine of worship is unlike anything in the natural world. It does not emanate from a single point. It comes from everywhere and nowhere, from the stone, from the air, from inside Wanda's own skull, and it speaks in two registers at once, a deep masculine resonance overlaid with a lighter feminine tone. Two voices braided together into one utterance. This is Dormin. Or what remains of Dormin, a being of such power that an entire civilization mobilized to seal it away. A presence so dangerous that the land itself was forbidden in the aftermath. And yet, When it speaks to Wanda, there is no malice in its tone, only a kind of ancient weariness, and perhaps something that might be curiosity. Dormin offers a bargain. Bring down the 16 colossi scattered across the forbidden lands. Destroy the idols that contain fragments of Dormin's essence. Do this, and the girl will be returned to life, the impossible made possible, death reversed, love triumphant over entropy itself. But what is Dormin? The game never provides a definitive answer. The name itself might be significant. Read backwards, it becomes Nimrod, a name associated in various traditions with rebellion against divine authority. A builder of towers meant to reach heaven, a king who challenged the gods and paid a terrible price. This could imply that Dormin was once mortal, or at least not always the fragmented entity that speaks from the shadows. The dual voice is crucial to understanding Dormin's nature. In many spiritual traditions, divine beings are understood to transcend gender, containing both masculine and feminine principles in perfect balance. But in Dormin's case, the two voices don't blend harmoniously. They overlap, they interrupt each other, they create dissonance. This might suggest that Dormin is not one being, but two, or many. Fragments of different entities forced together into an unholy amalgamation. The people who sealed Dormin away called the ritual forbidden. Not wrong, not evil, forbidden. There is a distinction. Evil implies malice. Forbidden implies danger, knowledge or power that mortals are not meant to possess. This suggests that Dormin's crime was not inherent wickedness, but rather the violation of some fundamental boundary. Perhaps Dormin discovered how to reverse death, how to reclaim souls from whatever lies beyond, and perhaps the gods themselves decreed that such knowledge must never be used. The method of Dormin's imprisonment is revealing. The entity was not destroyed. It could not be destroyed based on what we know. Instead, it was fragmented, divided into 16 pieces, each piece sealed within an idol, each idol placed within a colossus, each colossus sent to roam the forbidden lands, ensuring that the fragments could never reunite. This is not the typical pattern for defeating evil. When heroes slay demons in mythology, they don't preserve the demon's essence in sacred containers. They obliterate it entirely, salt the earth, erase the name. The fact that Dormin's essence was preserved suggests several possibilities. Perhaps destroying Dormin completely would have caused some catastrophic side effect. Or perhaps Dormin was too integral to the fabric of reality to be fully erased. Or perhaps, most troubling of all, the people who sealed Dormin away believed it might be necessary to restore the entity someday. Consider the colossi themselves. They are not monsters, in the traditional sense. They do not hunt, they do not terrorize. They exist in specific locations, moving in patterns that seem almost meditative. Some sleep, some wander, some stand vigil over particular ruins. They attack only when provoked, only when someone threatens the seals they carry. This behavior suggests they might be more than mere containers. Perhaps they are the transformed bodies of the shamans or warriors who volunteered to carry Dormin's fragments, their human consciousness suppressed but not extinguished, sublimated into a single imperative: guard the seal, protect the fragment, prevent the resurrection. If this interpretation holds, then every Colossus Wanda slays is not a monster defeated, but a guardian murdered, a willing sacrifice undone, a protector destroyed by the very thing they swore to prevent. The tragedy multiplies with each victory. The heroic act becomes increasingly hollow. The quest for love becomes a path of desecration. But Wanda does not know this, cannot know this. He sees only obstacles between himself and the miracle he has been promised, and Dormin does not enlighten him. The entity speaks in riddles and half-truths. "Thou art willing to shoulder the burden of fate," it tells him, not "thou art willing to resurrect thy beloved." The burden of fate. As if Wander has stepped into a role that was written long before he was born. As if he is fulfilling a prophecy rather than making a choice. There is another possibility. Perhaps Dormin is not lying, but its understanding of truth is so alien that it cannot communicate the full consequences of what Wander is about to do. Beings of immense age and power often perceive reality differently than mortal minds. Time might flow differently for Dormin. Cause and effect might operate in reverse. What seems like resurrection to Dormin might be something else entirely to human understanding. The resurrection itself is suspect. Dormin promises to return Mono to life in exchange for destroying the colossi. But resurrection is not mentioned. The exact words are, "that maiden soul, taken by the fates. It is possible to bring it back." Possible, not certain. And bring it back might not mean restore to life. It might simply mean recall the soul from wherever it has gone, trap it in the body, animate the flesh without truly restoring the person. This ambiguity is characteristic of entities that deal in forbidden knowledge. They do not lie, precisely, but they allow assumptions. They let desperate mortals fill in the gaps with hope, and Wander is nothing if not desperate. He hears what he needs to hear. The specific words do not matter, the possibility is enough. The cultural context surrounding Dormin is also significant. The people who sealed the entity away created an entire infrastructure to ensure it remained imprisoned. The shrine of worship was not simply locked or destroyed. It was left intact, accessible, almost as if someone wanted the possibility of Dormin's return to remain. A last resort. A forbidden option kept available in case of some unimaginable emergency. This could imply a more complex relationship between Dormin and the ancient civilization than simple good versus evil. Perhaps Dormin was once their god, their patron, the source of their prosperity and power, and perhaps Dormin demanded too much, asked for sacrifices that even devoted worshippers could not stomach. Or perhaps Dormin's power grew so vast that it threatened to consume everything, and the people were forced to chain their own god to save themselves. In this reading, the colossi become tragic figures on multiple levels. They are the transformed faithful, the last defenders of a god that betrayed them, cursed to guard the fragments of the very being they once loved, unable to die, unable to serve, reduced to wandering monuments in a dead land, waiting for the day someone would come to either complete their mission by keeping the seal intact, or end their suffering by breaking it. The game's title itself hints at this interpretation. Shadow of the Colossus. Not colossi, plural, but Colossus, singular, as if all 16 are fragments of one thing, one being, and that being is not Dormin, but the civilization itself. The people transformed their entire culture into a living seal. They became the shadow, the remnant, the echo of what they once were. Dormin's final words to Wander before the quest begins are chilling in their simplicity. But heed this. The price you pay may be heavy indeed. Maybe, not will be. The uncertainty is almost crueler than a definite warning. It leaves room for hope, for the possibility that Wander might be the exception, that his love might be pure enough to avoid the curse, that he might succeed where others failed. But the ruins tell a different story. Someone came before, someone carried the same sword, wore the same cloak, stood in the same shrine and made the same bargain, The landscape is littered with evidence of previous attempts, broken weapons, faded murals, symbols that suggest ritual and sacrifice. Wanda is not the first to try this, he is merely the latest, and so the question remains, is Dormin a god unjustly imprisoned, offering a legitimate miracle to those brave enough to free it? Or is it a demon, manipulating desperate souls into breaking the seal that protects the world from catastrophe? The game refuses to answer. It leaves the interpretation to the player, to the witness, to those of us who watch Wanda's journey unfold and must decide for ourselves what we're seeing. Perhaps the truth is that Dormin is both, and neither, a being so far beyond human categories that to call it good or evil is to miss the point entirely. It simply is, like a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. It offers power, it demands price, it keeps its bargains to the letter, even as it leads those who bargain with it toward ruin. The legend of Dormin is not a simple tale of heroes and monsters. It is a meditation on the nature of forbidden knowledge, on the price of love, on the terrible symmetry between salvation and damnation. It is a story about the doors we should not open, and what happens when we open them anyway. Before Wanda crosses the bridge into the Forbidden Lands, he is unmarked, young, determined, carrying grief like a weight in his chest, but still recognizably human. He has stolen a sacred sword, taken a forbidden path, committed to a course of action that will define the rest of his short, tragic life. But he does not yet bear the visible signs of what he is about to become. Mono lies on the altar in the shrine of worship. Her skin is pale, her body is still. The markings on her face suggest she was sacrificed, killed in a ritual meant to appease gods or avert catastrophe. In Wanda's culture, based on what we can infer, such sacrifices are not random cruelty. They are understood to be necessary, sacred obligations that maintain the order of the world. But Wanda rejects this. He does not care about cosmic order, does not care about the will of gods or the traditions of his people. He cares about one thing: Mono, the girl he loved, the girl who was taken from him by decree of powers he cannot challenge through normal means. And so he has come to the one place where the normal rules do not apply, where an entity older and stranger than the gods of his homeland offers an alternative. The first Colossus falls. It is a towering figure of stone and moss, wandering a grassy plain with slow, ponderous movements. Wanda approaches it with sword raised. The blade catches sunlight, reflecting a beam toward weak points on the Colossus's body. Glowing sigils, seals that pulse with ancient power. Wanda climbs, clings to fur and crevice, drives the sword deep into the glowing marks. The Colossus falls, black blood sprays from the wounds, and in the moment of death, something transfers. Dark tendrils erupt from the corpse. They writhe through, the air like smoke given malevolent purpose. They reach for Wanda, enter him. He collapses. Darkness fills his vision. When he wakes, he's back in the shrine of worship, on the floor before the altar. And something has changed. The shadow entities that invade Wanda after each Colossus falls are never fully explained. They appear as black, smoky forms, sometimes humanoid, sometimes simply as writhing darkness. They do not speak. They do not attack. They simply enter Wanda's body and disappear, as if he's become a vessel, a container for something that has no physical form of its own. These entities are almost certainly fragments of Dormin, pieces of the dismembered god returning to unity through Wanda's flesh. Each Colossus carries one fragment, sealed within an idol in its body. When the Colossus dies, the seal breaks. The fragment is freed, and it seeks the nearest available host, Wanda, standing over the corpse with sword in hand, becomes that host. This interpretation is supported by the physical changes that accumulate in Wanda's body. After the first Colossus, the changes are subtle, a slight pallor to his skin, faint dark circles under his eyes, nothing alarming. But with each subsequent victory, the transformation accelerates. His skin becomes ashen, veins darken and become visible beneath the surface. His movements slow slightly, as if his body is becoming heavier, more dense, less entirely his own. By the midpoint of his quest, Wanda's appearance has become genuinely disturbing. His eyes have taken on a strange luminescence. His face is gaunt, almost skeletal. Blood runs from his mouth and nose after each transformation, as if his body is rejecting what is being forced into it. And yet he continues, driven by love, by desperation, by the promise that just a few more colossi, just a few more sacrifices, and Mono will open her eyes. The physical corruption is paralleled by subtle changes in Wanda's behavior. In the early game, he dismounts from Agro frequently, stands at cliff tops, gazes out over the landscape. There is something almost contemplative in these moments, a young man pausing to absorb the weight of what he is doing. But as the game progresses, these pauses become less frequent. Wanda becomes more mechanical, more focused on the next Colossus, the next seal, the next fragment. This could imply that Wanda's will is being slowly subsumed, that each fragment of Dormin that enters him takes a piece of his autonomy in exchange. He is becoming less himself and more a puppet of the entity he is unknowingly resurrecting. The game never makes this explicit, but the visual language is clear. Wanda is dying, not in the simple sense of ceasing to function, but in the deeper sense of losing the qualities that made him human. There is tragic irony in this. Wanda undertakes this quest out of love. Love is the most human of emotions, the thing that separates us from mere survival instincts and elevates us towards something transcendent. But in pursuing that love, Wanda is sacrificing his humanity piece by piece. By the time Mono might be restored, will he still be capable of love? Will he remember why he came here? Or will he be merely a shell, animated by an alien will? The game suggests that Wanda is aware of the cost. After certain colossi, he looks down at his own hands, sees the darkness spreading beneath his skin, touches his face and feels the changes. But he does not turn back. This is not ignorance. It is determination. The conscious choice to pay any price, bear any burden, if it means Mono lives. This makes Wanda's descent more poignant. He is not a tragic hero brought low by hubris or deceived by cunning enemies. He knows what is happening to him, and he chooses it anyway. Chooses love over self-preservation. Chooses the possibility of Mono's life over the certainty of his own continued existence. In this sense, Wanda's transformation is not a curse forced upon him. It is a sacrifice willingly made. But sacrifice requires understanding, and there is much Wanda does not understand. He does not know that Dormin is using him, that the promise of resurrection is a means to an end, that Mono's life is not the goal, but the bait. He has been told there will be a price, but he has not been told what he is truly purchasing. Not Mono's resurrection, but Dormin's. The corruption of Wanda's body is also significant from a mythological perspective. In many traditions, physical transformation reflects spiritual state. Heroes who descend into underworlds or traffic with forbidden powers often emerge changed, sometimes stronger, sometimes wiser, but always marked by the journey. Wanda's markings are not signs of victory. They are stigmata, wounds that will not heal, evidence of a transaction that can never be undone. There is also the question of consent. Wanda consents to the bargain, but Mono does not. She lies unconscious on the altar, unaware that her lover is tearing down an ancient seal and damning himself in her name. If she could wake and see what Wanda is becoming, what he is doing, would she want it? Would she choose to live if the cost was this high? The game suggests she would not, that the Mono who eventually wakes is not the same girl who died. That resurrection is not restoration, but something else entirely. The shadow entities themselves deserve closer examination. They do not simply enter Wanda and disappear. In some cutscenes, they can be seen moving beneath his skin, writhing, struggling, as if they are alive and conscious and fighting for dominance in a body that was never meant to contain them. This creates the image of Wanda as a battleground, a contested space where human soul and divine fragments war for control. As the number of fragments increases, Wanda's physical presence begins to change in subtle ways. He stands straighter, moves with a confidence that borders on arrogance. His voice, when he calls out to Agro or grunts with exertion, begins to carry an echo, a second tone beneath the first, as if someone else is speaking through his throat. These details are easy to miss on a first playthrough, but they accumulate into a portrait of possession, of a young man slowly ceasing to exist as an individual and becoming a conduit for something vast and terrible. The most heartbreaking aspect of Wanda's descent is that he never wavers, never questions, never considers that perhaps the price is too high. His love for Mono is absolute. It has burned away doubt, calculation, self-preservation. He has become in a sense as inhuman as the entity possessing him, not out of corruption, but out of devotion. The greatest human emotion has elevated him beyond human limits of reason and caution, and in doing so it has opened him to the most inhuman of fates. By the time the 16th Colossus falls, Wanda barely resembles the young man who entered the Forbidden Lands. His skin is grey, his eyes burn with unnatural light, his body moves with a strange, disjointed quality, as if it is being controlled from outside, and when the final shadow entity enters him, he does not collapse as before. Instead, he rises, stands, turns to face the armed men who have been pursuing him, and when he opens his mouth to speak, Dormin's dual voice pours forth. The transformation is complete, Wanda is gone, the vessel is filled, and the resurrection Wanda sought is about to occur, but not in the way he imagined. Not with joy and reunion and love triumphant, but with horror, with violence, with the terrible logic of forbidden rituals playing out to their inevitable end. The 16 Colossi are not merely bosses to be defeated. They are monuments, living temples. Each one is a fusion of flesh and stone, fur and moss, sinew and ancient masonry. They do not fit neatly into categories like animal or construct. They exist in the space between, defying the natural order in ways that suggest they were never meant to be entirely one thing or another. Consider the first Colossus. It walks on two legs like a human, but its proportions are wrong. Its head is too small for its body. Its arms hang with an awkward weight. Moss grows on its shoulders and back, suggesting it has stood still for so long that vegetation has taken root. When it moves, there is a ponderous quality to its gait. Not the fluid motion of a living creature, but the creaking deliberation of architecture learning to walk. This fusion of stone and life appears in every Colossus, but manifests differently in each. Some are clearly more stone than flesh. Their bodies are riddled with ruins, platforms and archways carved into their backs, stairs that lead to nowhere, columns that support nothing. These architectural features are not decorative, they're integral to the Colossus's structure, as if the being was built as much as born, or perhaps as if it was once a temple that learned to move. Other colossi lean more toward the organic. They have fur that ripples in the wind, eyes that track wanderers' movements with something that might be recognition or curiosity, breath that rises in visible clouds in cold air. But even these more living colossi bear traces of the architectural, geometric patterns in their fur, symmetrical markings that suggest deliberate design rather than natural evolution, glowing sigils that pulse with light in rhythms too regular to be biological. The sigils themselves are crucial to understanding what the colossi are. They are the weak points, the places where Wander must drive his sword to break the seals, and they are always positioned in ways that require violation of the Colossus's body. You must climb onto its back, penetrate its defences, stab into places that should be protected, sacred. The act is visceral, intimate, more like desecration than combat. This is intentional. The game wants you to feel uncomfortable with what you're doing. It wants each victory to carry weight, moral weight, emotional weight, the weight of violating something that was never truly your enemy. The colossi do not seek you out. They do not threaten the world beyond the Forbidden Lands. They simply exist in their appointed places, carrying their sealed fragments, performing the function they were created to perform, until you arrive, until you provoke them, until you climb their bodies like living mountains and drive ancient steel into their cores. Then and only then do they become aggressive, defensive, trying desperately to shake you off, to protect the seals, to continue the duty that has defined their existence for untold centuries. Each colossus is also tied to its environment in ways that blur the line between creature and landscape. The third colossus, for example, is found in a lake. It moves through the water with unexpected grace, but it is also part of the lake's ecosystem. Platforms on its back align with ruins on the shore. Its movement patterns suggest it has been tracing the same circuit through these waters since before memory. It is less an inhabitant of the lake than a mobile extension of it. The eighth colossus, a massive quadruped that roams a desert, has similar integration. Its body is caked with sand and rock. When it moves, debris falls from its flanks like small avalanches. The ground trembles under its weight in ways that suggest it is so heavy, so massive, that it literally reshapes the terrain as it walks. To encounter it is to encounter a piece of the desert itself given form and purpose. This environmental integration serves multiple narrative purposes. First, it reinforces the idea that the colossi are not invaders or anomalies. They belong here. They are as much a part of the Forbidden Lands as the stone and water and sky. Second, it suggests that their removal will leave voids, empty spaces where something vast once stood. The land itself will be changed by their deaths, diminished in ways that cannot be easily measured. The architectural elements built into each colossus also tell stories. The fourth colossus, which dwells in a tomb-like structure, has tunnels carved through its body. You can walk inside it, through passages that suggest someone once used this being as a living building. Was it always massive, or did it grow over time, accreting stone and mass until the original structure was subsumed into something far larger? This sixth colossus, which hides in a lake beneath a building, has pillars growing from its back that mirror the pillars of the structure above, as if Colossus and architecture were meant to be viewed together. Two halves of a single design. This creates a recursive visual effect. The building holds the Colossus. The Colossus supports the building. Which came first? Or were they born together, in some act of creation that fused temple and guardian into one hybrid form. The design of the colossi also reflects different aspects of the divine or the monstrous, depending on perspective. Some have features that recall religious statuary, peaceful faces, meditative poses, a quality of serene endurance that suggests they were meant to be objects of worship. Others are more bestial, aggressive, armoured in ways that suggest they were designed for conflict. But even the most monstrous colossi are not evil. They are simply fulfilling their purpose. When the 13th Colossus attacks, it does so with the mechanical precision of a clock. There is no rage in its movements, no hatred. Just the execution of programming so deep it might as well be instinct. Protect the seal, destroy the intruder, continue existing. The simplicity is almost more frightening than malice would be. The colossi also vary dramatically in size. The first is large, perhaps 5 stories tall, but the 13th is nearly 10 times that size, so massive that clouds break against its shoulders. Standing before it, Wanda is less than an insect, less than a mote of dust. The sense of scale is overwhelming, and it raises questions. How does something so large sustain itself? What kind of power animates such mass? How long has it been walking, one slow step at a time, across the same barren plain? There is melancholy in the colossi. Even the ones that seem most aggressive, most monstrous, carry an air of sadness. They are alone, utterly alone. They do not interact with each other, do not communicate, do not share the burden of their eternal vigil. Each one stands watch in isolation, separated from its fellows by geography and perhaps by design. A network of solitary guardians, each bearing its fragment of Dormin in perfect loneliness. When they fall with a weight that seems to exceed their physical mass. They crumble, collapse, dissolve into black smoke and blood that evaporates into the air. What remains is not a corpse, but an absence, a space where something vast once stood. And in that absence you can feel the world shift slightly, become less, as if each colossus was a pillar holding up some invisible structure, and its removal causes imperceptible sagging in the fabric of reality. The game never asks you to mourn the colossi explicitly, but it gives you space to do so. After each falls, there is a long moment of silence before the shadow entities arrive. Time enough to stand over the fading remnants and absorb what you have done. Some players report feeling genuine guilt at these moments. Others feel triumph. The game does not judge. It simply presents the facts. You have destroyed something ancient and irreplaceable. Whether that destruction was necessary or justified is left for you to decide. In many ways, the colossi represent the sacred made vulnerable. In religious architecture, the sacred is usually protected, hidden behind veils, locked in inner sanctums, approached only through ritual and purification. But the colossi wear their sacred cause openly, if you know where to look. The glowing sigils are not hidden. They simply require effort and understanding to reach, and once reached, they are defenseless. The sword enters without resistance. The seal breaks with a sound like shattering glass. And what was sacred becomes profane in the moment of violation. This violation is necessary to progress. There is no path through the game that does not require killing every colossus. No diplomatic solution. No way to reason with them or appease them. They exist to be destroyed. Their narrative purpose is to die. And in dying, to release the fragments that will resurrect Dormin and corrupt Wanda. The player has no choice, but Wanda does. He chooses this path, chooses to see these beings as obstacles rather than guardians, chooses love over reverence, personal desire over cosmic order. The colossi also function as tests. Each one requires different tactics, different approaches. You must learn to read their bodies, identify the paths that lead to their seals, time your movements to their cycles. It is intimate knowledge, the kind of understanding you develop not through observation alone, but through contact, through climbing their fur, gripping their stone, feeling the rhythm of their movements. You learn their bodies the way you might learn a landscape by walking it repeatedly, and then you use that knowledge to kill them. In this sense, the act of defeating each colossus is a kind of betrayal. They trust that their bodies are impassable, that their size and power make them invulnerable, and you teach them otherwise. You show them that nothing is inviolable, that any defense can be overcome with enough determination, and in doing so, you destroy the illusion of permanence that these beings represent. You prove that even the eternal can end. The environmental damage from each colossus's fall is also worth noting. When they collapse, they often take parts of the landscape with them. Bridges crumble, cliffs crack, water surges from underground chambers. It is as if their presence was load-bearing in some fundamental way, and their absence causes structural failure. The forbidden lands are being unmade piece by piece. Each death is a small apocalypse, and by the end the world will be ready for the larger catastrophe that Wander success will bring. To understand the full scope of what Wander destroys, we must examine the colossi individually. Each one is unique. Each carries its own symbolism. Each represents a different facet of the civilization that created them, or the power that was sealed within them. The first colossus, Valus, is in many ways the gentlest. It wanders a grassy plain with no clear destination. When you approach, it reacts slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it would prefer to be left alone but understands it must defend itself. Its glowing sigils are on its legs and head, requiring you to climb its body like a living tower. The act feels transgressive even before you strike the first blow. Valus represents introduction. It teaches you the language of the game, how to grip, how to climb, how to identify weak points. But it also establishes tone. This is not a power fantasy. You are small, the world is vast, and what you're about to do will require persistence and violation in equal measure. The second Colossus, Quadratus, is more aggressive. It dwells in a valley and charges when provoked. Its body is heavily armoured, with plates of stone protecting most of its mass. To reach its seals, you must trick it into lowering its head, then climb onto its back while it thrashes. The violence of its movements is noteworthy. Unlike Valus, which tried to shake you off with almost lazy swings, Quadratus bucks and twists with genuine fury. It does not want to die. Quadratus represents escalation. The game is telling you that this will not remain easy, that the Colossi will fight harder as you progress, that the moral weight will increase with each victory. The third Colossus, Gaius, introduces vertical combat. It stands in a circular lake, a massive humanoid figure with a broken sword strapped to its back. The sword is symbolic. This Colossus was once a warrior, or perhaps it was meant to be one, but the blade is shattered. The fight is over. Now it simply stands vigil in its lake, waiting for an end it may not understand. To defeat Gaius, you must climb onto its sword, then onto its body, ascending to seals on its head and back. The climb is perilous. If you fall, the water below offers no safety, only the need to swim back to shore and begin again. Gaius teaches patience, teaches that some victories require multiple attempts, multiple refusals to give up. The fourth Colossus, Phaedra, hides in a tomb. It is one of the smaller colossi, more horse-like in shape. Unlike the others, It actively flees from you. It does not want to fight. It wants to run, to escape. You must chase it through underground tunnels, trap it and kill it while it tries desperately to get away. This is perhaps the most overtly cruel of the early encounters. You are not facing a defender. You are hunting prey that wants only to live. Phaedra represents the moment when the player might first feel genuine discomfort with their actions. The Colossus has done nothing. It threatens nothing. It simply wants to be left alone. And you cannot allow that. Your love for Mono requires Phaedra's death. The arithmetic is simple and terrible. The fifth Colossus, Avian, soars through the sky. It is a bird of impossible size with wings that span a small valley. It does not attack on sight. Instead, it circles, watches, curious about this small figure in its domain. To fight it, you must wait for it to dive, then leap onto its wings mid-flight. The battle takes place in the air, with Wanda clinging to feathers while the Colossus banks and rolls. Avian represents freedom and its loss. It is the only Colossus that flies, the only one that has truly escaped the ground, and you tear it from the sky. Watch it fall. Watch freedom become weight. Gravity reclaim what briefly soared. There is tragedy in the image of those great wings folding as the creature plummets toward the lake below. The sixth Colossus, Barber, waits in a temple partially submerged in water. It is covered in moss and wears a massive beard of vegetation. When you enter its chamber, it awakens slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it was dreaming and you have interrupted something precious. Its movements are deliberate, careful. It navigates the pillars and platforms with a precision that suggests deep familiarity. This is its home, has been for longer than you can imagine. Defeating Barber requires using the environment against it. You must climb the temple, position yourself on high platforms, and time your jumps to land on its head as it passes. It is a fight that emphasizes verticality and patience, and when Barber falls, it falls into the water with a splash that echoes through the entire temple. The sound is mournful, final. The seventh Colossus, Hydrus, dwells entirely underwater. It is a serpentine creature with an eel-like body and fins that propel it through submerged ruins. To fight it, you must swim in the same water, become vulnerable in its element. It is one of the few colossi that could easily kill you if it chose to, but it does not. It swims, investigates, only becomes aggressive when you grab onto its fins and begin climbing. Hydrus represents the unknown, the deep places where light does not reach. It is perhaps the most alien of all the colossi, the least comprehensible, and killing it feels less like victory than trespass. You have entered a realm that was not meant for you, destroyed a being perfectly adapted to that realm, and left nothing but silence in your wake. The eighth Colossus, Kuramori, is a quadruped that can climb walls. It dwells in a desert filled with ruins and geysers. Its body is low-slung, built for speed and agility. When you first encounter it, it ignores you. Only when you begin targeting its glowing weak points does it acknowledge your presence. And then it fights with a calculated intelligence that suggests it understands exactly what you're trying to do and is determined to prevent it. Kuramori is unique in that it has ranged attacks. It can shoot energy from its eyes, forcing you to take cover behind pillars and ruins. This makes the fight tactical. You must study its patterns, wait for openings, use the environment not just for traversal but for protection. And when you finally reach its seals and drive the sword home, there is a sense that you have defeated not just a creature, but a mind that understood the stakes. The ninth Colossus, Basaran, is a massive tortoise covered in geysers that shoot boiling water into the air. It patrols a grotto, moving with the slow certainty of something that has never known fear. To defeat it, you must flip it onto its back, exposing its vulnerable underside. The act requires using the environment, luring it onto weak platforms that collapse under its weight. There is something profoundly undignified about Basaran's death. This ancient being, armoured and patient, reduced to struggling helplessly on its back while you climb onto its belly and stab. It is not a heroic kill, it is an execution. A reminder that your quest has nothing to do with honour or glory, only results matter. Mono's resurrection, Dormin's return, the means justify themselves through the end. The 10th Colossus, Dirge, dwells in a vast desert canyon. It is a serpent that burrows through sand, surfacing to roar before diving again. Hunting it requires riding Agro at full speed through the dunes, timing your leap from horseback onto the Colossus's back as it breaches. It is perhaps the most kinetic battle in the game. Speed and timing over patient climbing. Dirge represents momentum, the point in the game where you have fallen into a rhythm of destruction. You know how to hunt now, how to read the landscape for clues, how to identify seals and reach them efficiently. You have become practiced at killing, and that practice should feel wrong, should trigger reflection. But the game gives you little time. The next Colossus is already marked on your sword. The next seal is already calling. The 11th Colossus, Colossia, is a small bull-like creature that inhabits a temple with a raised arena. It does not attack immediately. Instead, it observes you, circles, tests your intent. Only when you prove hostile does it charge, and even then, its aggression feels defensive, protective. This is its territory. You are the invader. Colossia is notable for its intelligence. It uses the environment strategically, tries to knock you into pits or pin you against walls, and it can be lured. You must use fire to control its movement, directing it where you need it to go. This makes the fight feel less like combat and more like manipulation. You're not just killing, you're deceiving, using the Colossus's instincts against it. The 12th Colossus, Pelagia, is another aquatic creature, larger than Hydrus and far more aggressive. It swims in a vast underground lake lit by shafts of sunlight from holes in the ceiling above. Its body generates electricity, creating zones of danger around it. To fight it, you must swim to platforms, use them to reach higher ground, and jump onto the Colossus when it surfaces to attack. Pelagia represents danger from multiple sources, not just the Colossus itself, but the environment, the water, the electricity, the distance between platforms. It is easy to drown fighting Pelagia, easy to misjudge and fall into water too far from safety. The fight demands precision and careful energy management, and when it ends, when the massive body sinks into the depths trailing black blood, there is a sense of relief that feels inappropriate. You should not feel relief at success, not when success means this. The 13th Colossus, Phalanx, is the largest in the game, a flying serpent so massive that it dwarfs everything else in the Forbidden Lands. It soars through a desert, casting shadows large enough to eclipse entire valleys. To reach it, you must ride Agro across the sands, matching speed with the Colossus, then leap onto its wings. What makes Phalanx unique is that it never attacks. Even when you're climbing on its back, stabbing at its seals, it does not fight. It simply flies, tries to shake you off through gentle rolls and banks. There is something profoundly peaceful about Phalanx. It is the only Colossus that seems to have transcended aggression entirely, and you kill it anyway. You kill it because you must. Because Dormin says so, because Mono lies dead and this ancient harmless being stands between you and her resurrection. Phalanx's death is the most visually spectacular. It crashes into the desert with an impact that raises dust for Kilome. The body segments collapse one by one, and when the shadow entities emerge, there are more of them than from any previous Colossus. They swarm around Wander, enter him in a flood. When he wakes in the shrine, the corruption has advanced drastically. He is more shadow than flesh now, more vessel than human. The 14th Colossus, Cenobia, is another small but aggressive creature. It resembles a lion and dwells in a ruined city. Unlike Colossia, which could be manipulated, Cenobia attacks relentlessly. It is fast, vicious. Hunting it through the ruins feels less like a boss fight and more like being hunted yourself. The tables have turned. You are prey now, and the only way to survive is to kill first. The 15th Colossus, Argus, is a golem of stone that walks through a desert filled with ruins. It carries a massive stone hammer and guards a temple. When you approach, it slams the hammer down with such force that the ground cracks. The fight requires you to trick it into striking pillars, creating platforms you can use to climb its body. It is a puzzle as much as a battle, a test of understanding over reflex. Argus feels like a guardian in the truest sense. It does not roam, it does not wander, it stands watch, and only when you prove yourself a threat does it engage. There is something noble in its stance, something worthy of respect, which makes its death all the more tragic. You've destroyed not a monster but a sentinel, a loyal servant fulfilling its duty until the moment you ended it. The 16th and final Colossus, Malice, towers over the Forbidden Lands. It is a massive humanoid figure that guards the direct approach to the shrine of worship. Unlike the others, Malice seems aware of you from the moment you enter its domain. It does not wait to be provoked. It begins attacking immediately, launching energy projectiles at level ruins and shatter stone. Malice is the final test, the culmination of everything you have learned. To reach it, you must navigate a battlefield under constant bombardment, climb its body while it actively tries to destroy you, and the climb is long, brutal, punctuated by falls that seem designed to break your will as much as your body. When you finally reach the last seal and drive your sword home, Malice does not crumble. It topples, falls like a mountain collapsing, and in that fall it seems to take the last vestiges of order with it. The shadow entities that emerge from Malice are overwhelming. They flood Wander's body in such numbers that he cannot contain them. His form swells, darkens, becomes monstrous. And when the men from his homeland arrive, when Aemon the priest raises his sword to stop the resurrection, it is already too late. Wander is gone. Dormin has returned, and the price of love is revealed in its full, terrible scope. In a game defined by isolation and silence, Agro the horse is Wander's only constant companion. She is not a tool, not a vehicle. She is a presence, a living being with her own personality and instincts, and she never leaves Wander's side. Not when he faces colossi that could crush her with a single step. Not when he begins to transform into something that should terrify her. She stays, loyal to the end and beyond. Agro represents something Wander is in danger of losing. Connection to life, to the living world. As he becomes increasingly corrupted by Dormin's fragments, as he loses colour and vitality and humanity, Agro remains unchanged, still warm, still breathing, still responding to his voice with ears that flick forward in recognition. She is an anchor, a reminder that not everything has been sacrificed yet, that some part of Wander still exists in the world of the living. The bond between Wanda and Agro is communicated through subtle details. The way he pats her neck after a long ride, the way she nuzzles his shoulder when he stands beside her, the way she waits patiently while he explores ruins or studies the landscape. There is trust here, the kind that only develops through shared experience, shared danger. She has carried him across cliffs and deserts, has stood steady while he fought, has never once refused his call. This makes her behaviour during the final approaches to the shrine all the more significant. As Wanda nears the 16th Colossus, Agro begins to show signs of unease. She tosses her head, snorts. Her hoofbeats become irregular, as if she is fighting the urge to bolt. She can sense something Wanda cannot, or perhaps will not. She knows they are approaching the end, and she is afraid. But she does not run. She continues to carry Wanda forward, even when every instinct must be screaming at her to flee, even when the corruption in Wanda's body has advanced to the point where he barely looks human anymore. Her loyalty overcomes her fear, and in this Agro demonstrates a kind of love that Wanda himself has lost sight of, unconditional, selfless, without calculation of cost. The bridge scene is perhaps the most emotionally devastating moment in the game. After defeating Malice, as armed men from Wanda's homeland chase him toward the shrine, Agro carries him across a narrow bridge that begins to collapse. The stone cracks, falls away behind them. Wanda urges her forward, and she runs, stretches her legs in a full gallop, but the bridge is falling too quickly. In the final moments, as the last section of bridge crumbles beneath them, Agro makes a choice. She turns slightly, shifts her weight, throws Wanda forward onto stable ground. The momentum costs her balance. She cannot recover, and she falls, tumbles backward into the chasm while Wanda scrambles to safety. The scream Agro makes as she falls is not the sound effect of a falling horse. It is a cry of fear and betrayal, not betrayal by Wanda, but by the world. She did everything right, ran as fast as she could, trusted the ground beneath her, and it was not enough. She falls because the world is falling apart, because Wanda's quest has destabilized the foundations of reality, and loyal horses fall just as readily as heroes when the earth gives way. Wanda's reaction is crucial. He reaches out, calls her name. There is genuine anguish in his voice. For the first time in many hours, something other than determination crosses his face. Grief, loss, the recognition that he has sacrificed more than he realized. But then the armed men arrive, Eamon and his warriors, and Wanda turns, staggers toward the shrine, leaves Agro in the abyss because Mono still waits. The quest is not complete. The price is not fully paid. This moment crystallizes Wanda's transformation. The young man who entered the Forbidden Lands would have climbed down, would have searched for Agro, would have chosen his companion over his quest, at least for a moment. But the thing wearing Wanda's skin does not hesitate, cannot afford to. Dormin is too close to resurrection. The fragments are too fully integrated. The human capacity for divided loyalty has been burned away by single-minded obsession. Agro's fall also serves a narrative function. It removes Wanda's last connection to the world he came from. She was his link to normalcy, to the life he had before Mono died. With her gone, there is nothing left to anchor him. No reason to remember who he was, no mirror to show him what he has become. The isolation is now absolute. Wanda is alone in a way he has never been before, and in that aloneness he is finally ready to complete the transformation. But Agro does not die. This is crucial. When the game ends, when the final cutscene plays out, we see her limping back to the shrine, injured, struggling, but alive. She climbs out of the chasm through means the game does not show. Perhaps she found a path. Perhaps she swam to shore in the river far below. Perhaps sheer determination kept her moving until she reached safety. The how matters less than the fact. She survives. Her survival represents something important. Not all sacrifices are permanent. Not all losses are final. In a game where death and resurrection are central themes, Agro's return is a small miracle, a grace note in a tragic symphony. She was willing to die for Wanda, but the universe for once chose mercy. Agro's role as witness is also significant. She sees everything, every Colossus slain, every shadow entity absorbed, every step of Wanda's transformation from human to vessel. And she does not judge, does not condemn. She simply stays, bears witness, carries the burden of knowledge without the capacity to change what is happening. In this, she represents the player. We watch, we participate, but we cannot alter the outcome. The story will unfold as it must, and all we can do is be present for it. The relationship between Wanda and Agro also serves as counterpoint to his relationship with Mono. Mono is absent, passive, an object rather than a subject. Wanda loves her, but cannot interact with her. She cannot respond, cannot affirm or deny his actions. She's a void he is trying to fill, a silence he is trying to break. Agro, by contrast, is present, active. She responds to his voice, follows his direction, offers companionship without demands or expectations. In a healthier narrative, this might lead Wanda to realize that the living connection is more valuable than the dead one, that Agro's loyalty means more than Mono's memory. But Wanda is not in a place to recognize this. His grief has calcified into obsession. The living world has become invisible to him. Only the goal matters, only Mono's resurrection. Everything else is merely instrumental, even Agro, even himself. When Agro returns to the shrine at the end of the game, she finds it transformed. Wanda is gone. Mono has awakened. And there is something else. A small figure, an infant with horns. The child that Wanda has become, or perhaps that was born from the union of Wanda's body and Dormin's essence. Agro approaches slowly, cautiously. She sniffs the child, and then she settles nearby, standing guard. This final image is rich with meaning. Agro, who lost Wanda on the bridge, has found him again in altered form, or perhaps she has simply resumed her duty, protecting what needs protection, companionship without judgment. The cycle begins again, but softer this time, gentler. The child is innocent, untouched by the corruption that consumed Wanda, and Agro's presence suggests that perhaps this innocence can be preserved. The game ends with Mono holding the infant, Agro standing guard, and the two of them ascending stairs toward a garden high above the shrine, a secret place, a sanctuary within the forbidden lands. And though the ending is bittersweet, though Wanda is lost and the colossi are destroyed and Dormin is sealed once more, there is a whisper of hope in this final tableau. Life continues, connection endures, and the loyal horse who refused to abandon her companion has found a new purpose in protecting what remains. The concept of forbidden knowledge runs through every culture's mythology like a dark thread. From Prometheus stealing fire to Eve tasting the fruit to Pandora opening the box, the pattern repeats. There are things mortals should not know, powers they should not touch, boundaries they should not cross, and those who transgress, no matter how pure their motives, pay a price that extends far beyond themselves. The Forbidden Lands embody this principle architecturally. The very name is a warning. This is a place that was sealed away deliberately. The bridge was destroyed to prevent crossing. The knowledge of Dormin's imprisonment was preserved specifically to ensure no one would attempt to break it. The ancient people did not simply defeat a threat and forget about it. They created an entire infrastructure of prohibition. They made the very land itself a warning, and yet the shrine remains accessible. The sword that can reveal the Colossi's weak points exists. The ritual to contact Dormin is not lost. This suggests ambivalence in those who came before. They sealed the knowledge, but they did not destroy it. They made it forbidden, not impossible. As if some part of them believed that circumstances might arise when the forbidden would become necessary, when the price of knowledge would be worth paying. This is the tragedy of Wanda's story. He is not wrong to love Mono, not wrong to grieve her death, not wrong to seek any means to restore her. Love is humanity's highest virtue. The willingness to sacrifice for another is noble. But the universe does not care about virtue or nobility. It has rules, laws written into the fabric of existence, and breaking those laws, even for the best reasons, does not exempt you from consequences. The nature of the forbidden ritual itself reveals what kind of knowledge we are dealing with. Dormin does not simply restore life. Dormin reverses death. And death is not merely a state, but a process, a transformation that cannot be undone without violating principles that govern reality itself. When something dies, it changes fundamentally. The body remains, but what animated it is gone, scattered, perhaps reincorporated into the universe in ways we do not understand. To call it back, to force it to re-inhabit flesh, is to tear holes in the natural order. Based on what we know from the game's structure and mythology, we can infer that the ancient civilization that sealed Dormin had discovered this truth the hard way. Perhaps they too loved someone they lost. Perhaps they too sought Dormin's power to reverse death. And perhaps they succeeded, only to discover that what returned was not what they had lost. That resurrection without transformation is impossible. That the dead, once returned, are never quite themselves again. This would explain why they sealed Dormin rather than destroying the entity entirely. They understood that the power might be needed, that future generations might face losses so profound that even contaminated resurrection would be preferable to permanent death. But they also understood the danger, so they created the colossi, 16 living seals, 16 obstacles that must be overcome, 16 opportunities to reconsider, to turn back, to choose the living world over the dead one. Wanda passes all 16 tests, and in doing so he proves himself unworthy of the knowledge he seeks, not because he lacks strength or skill or determination, but because he lacks wisdom, the wisdom to understand that some dead should stay dead, that some grief cannot be fixed, that love, when it refuses to accept loss, becomes a form of violence against the order of things. The game presents this philosophy subtly. It never lectures, never tells you that what you are doing is wrong. It simply shows you the cost, the corruption spreading through Wanda's body, the majestic beings falling one by one, the landscape emptying, the silence deepening. And it trusts you to feel the weight, to understand, even as you continue pressing forward, that this is tragedy in motion, that there are no winners here, only different kinds of loss. The forbidden knowledge in Shadow of the Colossus is not theoretical. It is practical, experiential. Wanda gains the knowledge of what it costs to reverse death. He learns firsthand that the price is not abstract, not metaphorical. It is written in his own transforming flesh, in the death of innocents who stood in his way, in the violation of sacred spaces, in the resurrection of an entity that should have remained sealed. He learns that forbidden knowledge is forbidden not to protect the powerful, but to protect the seeker. There's also the question of whether the knowledge was worth having. At the end of the game, Mono lives. Wanda's goal is accomplished, but Wanda himself is gone, transformed into an infant with horns, his memories, his personality, his identity as the young man who loved Mono, all erased. He got what he wanted. She lives. But he cannot be with her, cannot share in the life he restored, cannot even remember why he did what he did. This outcome suggests that forbidden knowledge operates on rules that transcend human intention. You can achieve your goal, but the universe will extract payment in ways you did not anticipate. Wanda wanted Mono alive. He got Mono alive. But the universe took Wanda in exchange, not his life, which he was willing to give, but his self, his continuity of consciousness, his ability to experience the fruit of his sacrifice, the cruelest possible payment. The philosophy of Shadow of the Colossus does not condemn Wanda, but it does not absolve him either. It presents his choice as understandable, human, perhaps even inevitable given who he is and what he has lost, but understanding does not equal justification. The game asks us to hold two truths simultaneously. Wanda's love is real and pure, and Wanda's actions cause immense harm. Both things are true, both things matter, and the tension between them cannot be resolved through logic or philosophy. It can only be felt. This philosophical approach is rare in games. Most present clear moral frameworks. Heroes are good, villains are evil, your actions are justified because you are the protagonist. But Shadow of the Colossus refuses this comfort. It makes you the agent of destruction, makes you powerful and victorious and morally compromised all at once. And it trusts that this complexity will resonate more deeply than simple heroism ever could. The forbidden nature of Dormin's knowledge also raises questions about divine authority. Who decides what is forbidden? The gods. If so, what gives them that right? Wanda's people have laws and traditions. They sacrifice those deemed cursed. They forbid certain places and rituals. But are these prohibitions just, or are they simply the exercise of power by those who claim to speak for higher authorities? Wanda's rebellion can be read as a rejection of unjust authority. Mono was sacrificed, killed by people who believed they had the right to make such decisions. Wanda refuses to accept this, refuses to bow to traditions that demand innocent death. In this light, his quest becomes resistance, an act of defiance against a social order that treats human lives as currency in transactions with uncaring gods. The fact that his resistance leads to catastrophe does not necessarily mean he was wrong to resist, but the game provides evidence for both interpretations. Is Wanda a hero fighting unjust laws, or a fool tampering with forces beyond his understanding? The answer may be both. The laws may be unjust, and violating them may still be disastrous. Sometimes there are no good choices, only choices, and consequences that cannot be avoided through righteousness of intent. The architecture of the Forbidden Lands supports this ambiguity. The temples are not evil places. They are beautiful, carefully constructed, filled with evidence of sophisticated culture and deep spirituality. The people who built them were not monsters. They were humans trying to create meaning in a difficult world, and they failed, or they succeeded at terrible cost, or they achieved something we cannot fully judge without knowing their full context. The ruins speak in fragments, and fragments always leave room for interpretation. What the game makes clear is that knowledge itself is neutral. Dormin's power is not inherently evil, it simply is. Like any force of nature, it can be used or misused. The same knowledge that resurrects Mono also frees Dormin. The same ritual that demonstrates love also enables catastrophe. The moral weight comes from application, from choice, from the fact that Wanda knew there would be a price and chose to pay it anyway without fully understanding what he was purchasing. In the end, the philosophy of Shadow of the Colossus is humanistic in the deepest sense. It does not appeal to divine judgment or cosmic justice. It simply shows how human emotions, love and grief and desperation, interact with forces larger than ourselves. And it suggests that wisdom lies not in suppressing those emotions, but in recognizing their limits, in understanding that love does not conquer all, that some losses cannot be undone, that the forbidden exists for a reason, and that reason is often written in the bones of those who came before. The corruption of Wanda's body is not a sudden event but a gradual metamorphosis that unfolds across the entire game. Each Colossus that falls releases shadow entities that enter him like smoke seeping into cracks. At first, the changes are subtle, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. A slight darkening of the skin around his eyes, a faint tremor in his hands after he wakes in the shrine, the suggestion that something foreign has entered his system and his body is trying unsuccessfully to reject it. By the fourth or fifth Colossus, the changes become undeniable. Wanda's complexion has shifted from healthy tan to sickly pallor. Dark veins have begun to appear on his arms and face, spreading like cracks through porcelain. His eyes, which were once clear and focused, now carry an unnatural sheen, a reflective quality that suggests they are seeing more than the mortal world, or perhaps less. Perhaps they are beginning to look inward, toward the fragments of Dormin gathering in his core. The physical transformation mirrors an emotional one. Wanda becomes more isolated, more mechanical in his movements. The small gestures of humanity, petting Agro, pausing to look at the landscape, responding to sound and movement in the environment, gradually disappear. He becomes focused, single-minded, a machine optimized for one purpose, finding and destroying the next Colossus. Everything else fades into irrelevance. This loss of humanity is perhaps more disturbing than the physical corruption. A body can be diseased and still retain the self, but when behavior changes, when personality erodes, when the qualities that made someone recognizable disappear, that is a death of a different kind. Wanda is dying from the inside out. The young man who crossed the bridge is being slowly erased, overwritten by something that wears his face but thinks with an alien mind. The shadow entities themselves are never fully explained. They appear after each Colossus falls, emerging from the corpse like dark breath. They move with purposeful intent, seeking Wanda specifically, and when they reach him, they do not attack. They enter, merge, become part of him. This suggests they are not independent beings, but fragments seeking to reunite. Pieces of a shattered whole drawn to the vessel that has been prepared to receive them. Based on the visual language of the game, we can infer that these entities are pieces of Dormin's consciousness or essence. Each Colossus was a seal, a prison, and within each prison was locked a fragment of the entity that the ancient people dismembered and scattered. By destroying the Colossi, Wanda is not just removing obstacles, he is performing a resurrection ritual, gathering the scattered pieces, providing them a new body to inhabit since Dormin's original form has long since been destroyed or dispersed. The process is invasive in ways that border on body horror. Watch closely during the cutscenes where Wanda absorbs the shadow entities. His body convulses, arches, strains against forces that are literally rewriting his cellular structure. Blood runs from his nose and mouth. His skin darkens further, veins bulge. For a moment he is caught between two states, human and vessel, self and other. And then the convulsion passes, he collapses, and when he wakes, more of him is gone. The psychological impact is suggested through subtle details. Wanda begins to move differently. His gait becomes slightly off, as if the muscles are being controlled by something still learning how to operate a human body. His head tilts at odd angles when he listens. His eyes track movement with an intensity that feels predatory rather than curious. These are small things, but they accumulate into a portrait of possession, of a consciousness being slowly displaced by another. By the 10th Colossus, Wanda barely resembles himself. His skin has gone grey, almost corpse-like. The dark veins have spread to cover most of his exposed flesh in branching patterns that look less like blood vessels and more like script, like words being written in a language of shadow and entropy. His eyes glow faintly in darkness, and when he stands still, which is rare, there is an uncanny quality to his stillness, the stillness of an object rather than a person. The transformation accelerates dramatically after the 13th Colossus, Phalanx. The sheer size of that Colossus, the number of shadow entities it releases, overwhelms whatever resistance Wanda's body was still offering. When he wakes from that absorption, he is visibly different, taller. His proportions slightly wrong, his movements jerky and incomplete, as if several different impulses are competing for control of the same limbs. This is the beginning of the end, the point where the vessel is nearly ready and the human is nearly gone. The game never allows Wanda to speak about what is happening to him. We do not know if he is aware of the corruption, if he feels the entities moving inside him, if he understands that he is becoming less himself with each passing moment. His silence could indicate acceptance, or it could indicate that the capacity for self-reflection has already been compromised, that the Wanda who might have questioned or mourned his transformation is already too diminished to speak. This silence is itself a form of tragedy. In classical drama, protagonists usually have moments of recognition, anagnorisis, the moment when they understand what they have done and what it has cost them. But Wanda is denied even this. He does not get to understand his fate, does not get to accept or reject it consciously. He simply continues forward, driven by love that has become indistinguishable from compulsion until there is nothing left of him but the momentum of his quest. The final transformation, after the 16th Colossus, is complete and terrifying. The last wave of shadow entities does not simply enter Wanda. It floods him. His body swells, distorts, grows to grotesque proportions. Dark horns erupt from his skull. His limbs elongate and twist. His face becomes a screaming mask of shadow and fury. And when Lord Aemon and his warriors arrive at the shrine, they are not facing Wanda. They are facing Dormin, wearing what remains of Wanda like a suit of flesh that no longer fits. This final form is monstrous but also tragic. You can still see traces of Wanda in it. The shape of the cloak he wore, the tattered remnants of humanity clinging to a frame that has outgrown them. The transformation is not enhancement but destruction. Wanda has not become powerful. He has been consumed by power. The difference is crucial. One implies agency, the other implies annihilation. Dormin, speaking through this grotesque puppet, addresses Aemon with the dual voice that is echoed through the shrine. It recognizes him, knows he is a priest from Wanda's homeland, and it mocks him, questions why he has come. After all, the covenant is complete. The seals are broken, The ritual is fulfilled. What does Eamon think he can accomplish against a reunited god? But Eamon has brought the ancient sword, the same blade Wanda used to find the colossi, and he knows its true purpose, not to break seals, but to create them. The sword is a tool of binding, and in the hands of someone who understands its power, it can be used to seal Dormin once more. He raises it, speaks words of power, and the shrine responds. A vortex opens in the pool at the center of the temple, a wound in reality, a doorway to the space between spaces where entities like Dormin can be trapped. The vortex pulls at the transformed Wanda, draws the shadow entities from his body. Dormin fights, rages, sends forth tendrils of darkness to destroy the men. But the vortex is inexorable. One by one, the shadow fragments are torn away, sucked into the void, and as they leave, Wanda's body shrinks, collapses, returns toward human proportions. But the process is not gentle, it is violent, destructive, like watching something being unmade in reverse. When the last shadow entity is pulled free, what remains is not Wanda as he was. It is an infant, a newborn with small horns protruding from its skull. The horns are all that remains of the transformation, a mark that cannot be erased, evidence of what was endured, of what was survived. The infant cries, confused, innocent, unaware of the journey that led to this moment. This final transformation is the most complete reversal in the game. Wanda began as a young man capable of love and action. He ends as an infant incapable of either. All agency has been stripped away, all memory, all continuity of self. In a sense, Wanda did die. The person who crossed the bridge no longer exists. What remains is something new, unmarked by grief or love or determination. A blank slate, a second chance that will never remember why it was needed. The symbolism is rich. The infant represents rebirth, but also regression. Wanda sought to reverse death. And in a sense he succeeded, but not for Mono, for himself. He has been reborn, returned to the beginning, given innocence at the cost of everything that made him who he was. It is the cruelest possible answer to his quest. He wanted to restore what was lost. And he has been restored. But restoration required becoming nothing, erasing the self that sought the restoration. And yet, there is something in this ending that resists complete despair. The infant lives, Mono lives, Agro lives. The world has not ended. Dormin has been sealed again. The catastrophe has been contained. And in the garden above the shrine, in that secret place of green and growing things, there is possibility. The infant will grow, will learn, will perhaps become someone new, someone who carries no memory of Wanda's tragedy, but might in time create meaning from the ruins of that failed quest. The transformation of Wanda is not simply a mechanical plot point. It is the emotional and philosophical core of the game. It asks, what are we willing to become to save what we love? And it answers, we're willing to become nothing, to sacrifice not just our lives but ourselves, our continuity, our ability to remember or be remembered. And it suggests that this willingness, while tragic, is also fundamentally human. The capacity to love something more than we love survival, more than we love identity, more than we love the integrity of our own souls. When Mono wakes, it is not dramatic. There is no thunder, no flash of light, no moment of obvious miracle. She simply opens her eyes, sits up slowly, looks around the shrine with the confusion of someone waking from a long sleep. She is alive, breathing, moving. Everything Wanda fought for has been achieved. And yet, the moment is deeply unsettling, because we do not know what she is. Is this truly Mono, the girl who died, or is it something wearing her shape, a body animated by forces that have nothing to do with the soul that once inhabited it? Dormin promised to bring her back, and technically, that promise has been kept. She is back. But at what cost? And what does back mean when we are talking about consciousness and identity and the essential self that supposedly survives death? The game does not answer these questions. Mono does not speak. She moves through the shrine like a sleepwalker. Eventually she finds the infant with horns, studies it. Some recognition seems to pass across her face, not of identity, but of connection. As if she understands, on some level she cannot articulate, that this creature and her return are linked, that whatever brought her back also created this small, horned thing that was once a young man who loved her. The ambiguity is intentional. The game could have shown us a joyful reunion, Mono recognizing Wanda in some form, embracing him, validating his sacrifice. But it does not. Instead, it shows us uncertainty, distance, the sense that something has been achieved but perhaps not what was intended. Resurrection has occurred, but restoration may be incomplete or impossible. Based on what we know about resurrection mythology across cultures, we can infer that Mono's return is likely compromised in ways that are not immediately visible. In most traditions, the dead who return are not quite right. They lack warmth, or memory, or the spark of will that defines living consciousness. They are echoes, shadows, functionally alive but existentially diminished. This could imply that Mono, while breathing and moving, may be missing something essential, some quality that made her herself. The mark on her face offers a clue. In the opening cutscene, we see that she bore a marking, a sign that she was chosen for sacrifice, a cursed one in the language of Wanda's people. This mark presumably had meaning, identified her as someone the gods wanted dead, someone whose continued existence threatened cosmic order. And yet Wanda defied this, brought her back despite the mark, despite the will of whatever powers decreed her death. If we follow this logic, Mono's resurrection is not just a personal act of love. It is cosmic rebellion. Wanda has overturned a divine judgment, retrieved something the universe had claimed, and while he paid a terrible price for this theft, he succeeded. Mono lives when she should not. The question is whether this creates a debt that will eventually be called in, whether Mono's continued existence will require further payment, or whether the sacrifice of Wanda and the resealing of Dormin was sufficient to balance the scales. The game suggests that balance has been achieved, but precariously. The shrine is quiet. The colossi are gone. Dormin is sealed in a new way, contained in the vortex rather than scattered across 16 vessels. And Mono is alive. 3 entities have converged into a new configuration. Wanda became the infant, Dormin became the seal, and Mono became... what? The beneficiary? The witness? The one who must now carry the knowledge of what was done for her sake? Her silence is significant. She does not thank Wanda because she does not know what he did. She does not mourn him because she does not remember him. Their love, which drove the entire narrative, exists now only in the player's memory. The 2 people who shared it are gone. Wanda erased, Mono reset. What they had together is lost as surely as if they had both died, except one of them lives, and must now build a new life with no foundation except the ruins of someone else's sacrifice. There is cruelty in this. Wanda gave everything so that Mono might live, and she will live without ever understanding the gift. Will raise the horned infant without knowing it is her lost love transformed. Will build her life in the garden above the shrine without realizing it is a monument to grief and forbidden knowledge. Her ignorance might be a mercy. It might prevent her from being crushed by the weight of what was done. But it also makes Wanda's sacrifice invisible, erases his agency, reduces him to an anonymous force that shaped events she will never comprehend. The truth of Mono's revival is that it is complete physically and incomplete spiritually. Her body functions, her mind processes information. She can learn, grow, experience life. But the continuity of her existence has been broken. There was Mono before death, and there is Mono after resurrection, and the connection between them is unclear. Does she remember dying? Does she retain her personality, her memories, her sense of self? Or has she been factory reset? Returned to some baseline state that resembles who she was but lacks the accumulation of experience that created her identity? The game's choice to leave this ambiguous is profound. It refuses to validate Wanda's choice with a happy ending, refuses to punish it with obvious failure. Instead, it presents something murky, complicated. Mono lives, which was the goal, but the victory is hollow because the person who achieved it cannot celebrate, cannot even witness. Wanda has become unknowable to himself, and Mono, the center of his entire world, walks through her new life without him. If we interpret this generously, we might say that Wanda succeeded. He wanted Mono alive, and she lives. The fact that he is not there to be with her is tragic but irrelevant to the stated goal. Love does not require reciprocity or recognition. It can be entirely selfless, entirely about the beloved's well-being regardless of cost to the self. In this reading, Wanda's transformation into an infant is not failure but transcendence. He is given so completely that no trace of ego remains, only the gift, only the result. But there is also a darker reading. Perhaps Mono's revival is an illusion. The body lives, but the soul is elsewhere. Dormin promised to bring back her soul. But bringing back does not necessarily mean returning it to the body. Perhaps the soul was retrieved and then consumed by the ritual, used as fuel for Dormin's resurrection. And what wanders the shrine now is an empty vessel, a golem of flesh animated by residual energies but lacking the essential spark that makes a person real. This interpretation is supported by Mono's behavior. She does not speak, does not express joy or fear or confusion. She simply moves, functional but hollow. The game could be showing us the horror of a wish granted literally but not truly. Wanda wanted Mono's body restored to life, and it has been. But the person who inhabited that body is gone, and he sacrificed everything for an empty replica. Neither interpretation can be proven from the game's text. Both are supported by visual details and thematic concerns. The truth is probably somewhere between them. Mono is neither fully restored nor completely empty. She is damaged, incomplete, carrying losses she does not remember but that shape her nonetheless. And she must now live in a world she was never meant to return to, bearing burdens she does not understand. The final scene, with Mono holding the infant and Agro standing guard as they ascend toward the garden, can be read multiple ways. It might be hopeful, a new family forming from the ruins of tragedy. Or it might be tragic. 3 survivors bound together by circumstances none of them fully understand, carrying secrets that will never be spoken because they can never be known. The game allows both readings, invites both, and refuses to arbitrate between them. What is clear is that resurrection is not restoration. Death has been reversed, but not erased. The price has been paid, but the merchandise is damaged. Wanda wanted to undo what was done, and he has discovered that undoing is impossible. You can move forward, you can transform, you can create new configurations, but you cannot return to what was. The past is gone, and trying to reclaim it only destroys the present. The garden at the top of the shrine is a place that exists outside the main narrative, hidden, secret, accessible only through stairs that are easy to miss. It is a place of startling beauty in a land defined by emptiness. Trees grow here, fruit hangs from branches, water pools in the natural formations, light filters through leaves. Everything the Forbidden Lands are not, everything they once were, perhaps, before catastrophe unmade them. This garden is where Mono carries the infant, where Agro follows, where the three survivors of the ritual converge to begin something new. The symbolism is clear. The garden represents Eden, paradise, the place of innocence before knowledge brought corruption. By ascending to it, the characters are symbolically leaving behind the site of transgression and entering a space where new life might flourish, untainted by what came before. But can they truly leave it behind? The infant bears horns, a permanent mark of Wanda's transformation, of Dormin's power, of forbidden knowledge enacted and survived. The horns are small, delicate, but they are indelible. This child will never be entirely normal, will carry visible evidence of its strange origin. And as it grows, questions will arise. Where did these horns come from? What am I? Who was I before I became this? Mono will have no answers. She does not remember Wanda, does not know the story of the 16 colossi or the ritual of resurrection. To her, this infant is a mystery, a being she found in a shrine filled with cryptic symbols and ancient power. She may love it, may choose to raise it, but she cannot explain it, cannot contextualize its existence within any narrative that makes sense. It simply is, and she must accept that without understanding. Agro, in her way, knows more than either of them. She witnessed everything, felt Wanda's transformation through shared experience. She knows this infant is connected to the young man who once rode on her back, but she cannot speak, cannot translate her knowledge into terms the others could understand. She can only stay close, offer warmth and protection, be the living bridge between what was and what is now. The garden itself might be significant beyond mere symbolism. It may be a place of power, a location where the natural order asserts itself with unusual strength. The fact that it exists at all, hidden within the Forbidden Lands, suggests it was preserved intentionally, perhaps by the same people who sealed Dormin, a sanctuary, a seed bank, a promise that even in a cursed land, life retains the capacity to flourish. If this interpretation holds, then Mono's choice to raise the infant in the garden is significant. She's planting the next generation in soil that has not been corrupted, giving it access to living things, growing things, the fundamental processes of nature that operate independently of human will or divine intervention. The infant will grow surrounded by life, and perhaps that life will counterbalance the death that preceded its birth. But there is also danger in the garden. It is isolated, cut off from the larger world. The infant will grow without community, without other children, without the social structures that shape human development. It will have Mono and Agro and the growing things. But will that be enough? Can a single person, herself damaged and incomplete, raise a child who is literally marked by supernatural corruption? Or will the isolation amplify the strangeness, turn the child into something that can never integrate into normal human society? The game does not show us the future, does not tell us whether the infant thrives or struggles, whether it becomes a person capable of love and connection, or whether it becomes something else, something neither fully human nor fully divine, a hybrid creature whose very existence poses questions that cannot be answered through ordinary means. What we do know is that the cycle has been interrupted. Dormin is sealed again, but differently than before, not scattered across 16 colossi but trapped in a vortex. The method of containment has changed, and this suggests that the next time, if there is a next time, the pattern will be different. Perhaps easier to break, or perhaps impossible. The knowledge of how to create colossi may have died with the civilization that first sealed Dormin. Future generations might lack the skill or understanding to recreate those living seals. This raises the possibility that Dormin's current imprisonment is more fragile than the original, that the entity might escape again, perhaps soon, perhaps centuries hence, and when it does, there may be no guardians waiting, no 16 obstacles to overcome, just a pool in a shrine and a voice offering bargains to those desperate enough to listen. The sealing was successful, but it may have planted the seeds of easier future failure. The infant's horns may also play a role in future events. If this child grows and has children of its own, the horns might be inherited. A bloodline might emerge, people marked by Dormin's touch, perhaps with abilities or knowledge that ordinary humans lack. They might become shamans, oracles, bridges between the mortal world and whatever dimension Dormin inhabits. Or they might be feared, hunted, killed as abominations by those who remember the stories of the Forbidden Lands. The game invites this kind of speculation. It presents an ending that is simultaneously conclusion and beginning. The immediate crisis is resolved, but the implications extend infinitely forward. Every solution creates new problems. Every answer raises new questions. The story could end here, or it could continue for generations, rippling outward in ways that transform entire cultures. There is also the question of Lord Emmon and his warriors. They survived the encounter with Dormin. They witnessed the resealing. They know that Wanda came to the Forbidden Lands, that he broke the covenant, that he resurrected something that should have stayed buried. Will they tell others? Will the knowledge of what happened here spread? Or will they keep silence, understanding that some stories are too dangerous to share? If they speak, then Mono and the infant may be sought, hunted, seen as loose ends that need to be tied, evidence that must be erased. Emmon's people sacrificed Mono once already. They might do so again if they believe she poses a threat, and the horned infant would certainly be seen as a threat, as proof that Dormin's influence persists, that the sealing is incomplete, that something needs to be done. But if Ammon keeps silence, if he and his warriors take the secret to their graves, then Mono and the infant might live in peace, hidden in the garden, forgotten by the world beyond the Forbidden Lands, free to create whatever life they can from the fragments they have been given. The choice Aemon makes will determine whether the aftermath is one of peace or continued pursuit, and the game gives us no indication of which he chooses. What is certain is that the world has changed. 16 colossi are gone. Ancient beings that walked the earth for untold centuries has been destroyed. The Forbidden Lands are truly empty now. Nothing remains but ruins and memories, and 3 living beings in a garden, trying to make sense of survival when so much has been lost. It is not the ending anyone wanted. Not Wanda, who is gone. Not Mono, who does not remember wanting anything. Not Aemon, who came to prevent catastrophe and arrived too late to stop it, only to contain the aftermath. And yet, there is the garden, green and alive, fed by water that flows from unknown sources, sustained by light that reaches even into this forgotten place. The fact that it exists suggests that the world is not done with the forbidden lands, that life insists on persisting even in spaces marked by death. That beauty can grow from tragedy if given time and soil and the stubbornness of living things. The horned infant will grow in this garden, will learn to walk among the trees, will taste fruit that grows nowhere else, will be shaped by isolation and strangeness into something that no category can contain, not human, not divine, not cursed, not blessed, simply alive, simply continuing. A small, defiant answer to a world that keeps insisting on finality. In the end, Shadow of the Colossus is not a story about defeating evil or saving the world. It is a story about love's refusal to accept loss, about the price of that refusal, and about the strange broken things that survive when the price has been paid and the bargain completed. It is a story about grief transformed into action, about action transformed into consequence, and about consequence transformed finally into something that might, with care and time and improbable grace, become a future worth living. The garden waits, the infant breathes, Mono moves through a life she did not choose but must now inhabit, and Agro stands watch, loyal to the end and beyond. The story is over, but the aftermath continues, will always continue, because stories never truly end, they only pause, wait, prepare to begin again when someone finds the courage or desperation to cross a bridge they should never cross, to make a bargain they cannot afford, to sacrifice everything for a chance at reversing what cannot be reversed. The forbidden lands are silent now, but silence is not emptiness. It is waiting, and the bridge, though damaged, still stands, and the sword, though hidden, still exists, and somewhere in the margins of the world someone grieves, someone loves beyond reason, someone prepares to repeat the pattern, because that is what we do. We love, we lose, and we cannot bear the losing. So we cross bridges, we break seals, we sacrifice guardians and corrupt ourselves and damn the consequences, because love makes fools of us all, makes heroes and villains of us equally, makes us human in all the worst and best ways that word implies. And in a garden at the top of a shrine in a land that should be abandoned, an infant with small horns reaches for sunlight, and the cycle perhaps begins again.